to take a little bit of a deeper dive into using if then else statements. We've done that a little bit working with various projects, but I want to kind of talk about it a little bit more strongly because I think we're having a little bit of confusion with them. So I've got 3 versions of Scratchy here, and I also have 2 variables called myValue1 and myValue2. First, we're going to look at my first Scratchy, and his job is to focus on the if and if-else statement blocks. So over here, my first one is just using an if block. There's no else. And my other one is an if-else, and we'll talk about this third one in a second. But just looking at this one, the way these work is when they're blank, if you were to look at a blank if then, looks like this. There's kind of this long hexagon shape here, and so what fits in there are under operators where the green things are. And see the ones with those same kind of hexagon shapes? Those are things that you can put in there, and it basically says if something is less than something else, or you can do if it's equal, or you can do if it's greater than, right? Those are various little blocks you can put in there. So what happens is it looks at the thing in the block, and it has to be a statement that's either going to be true or it's going to be false. And if it's true, it does whatever is inside the if. So in this case up here, I'm checking on a piece of data called myValue1. And if it is a 1, that is, you look at the value of myValue1, and over here, myValue1 is actually set to 0. So this condition right now, in the state that the project is in, will not be true. But if I go and I change the value of myValue1, which I'm going to do over here, which hopefully works. Yeah, so now my value is set to 1. If this is true, it will run that condition. Now an if statement with add an else will just run that thing if it's true, and then anything after that will be executed. So let me just run this block. MyValue1 currently is true, so I expect to see condition is true. And then it's going to drop to the very next statement. So here it is, the condition is true, and then it goes right on to that next statement. If I change myValue1 to something other than 1, which I just changed it to 0, then it should not run where it says condition is true because my condition will be false. But it should go down to that next statement. And there it is. It just went down to my next statement. So that's what an if does. So if you only want to do something special on a certain occasion, right, that would be an if. But if you definitely want to do the next statement no matter what this was, you just use if. Now an if with an else, so you have your then right here, if then, so it looks just like the other one, but now the else is in play. So this says when that's true, do this. But don't do the other thing. That's what the else is. The else only happens if the condition up here is false. So let's do what we did before. So I'm going to change my value to be a 1. And so again, I'm looking here, my value is 1. So what I expect to have happen, this comes true, so it will do the statement right after the then. But it won't do the else. The else only happens if this isn't true. So I click on that. My condition is true. It doesn't run that other statement. But if I change this to something other than 1, and I click it, now my value is 1 is a false statement. It's going to do the else path. So you can check if something has a certain value, do one thing, otherwise do something else. The difference between these two is if it's true, it will do the thing after the then. This one will always do the thing that follows. This one will not do the thing that follows if this one was true. So you have a little more control, a little more complexity perhaps, though you really have to think carefully about when you want one or the other. Now what I've got here is I've got a not statement. So there's an operator here which is a not, and what a not does is it takes whatever is in your condition here and takes the opposite value. So I have a comment here. Not will take the opposite value of the condition. If the condition is true, then it returns false. And remember what happens. If the thing in here is false, it goes around to the else. So my value, let's see what I've got it now. It's at 0. I'm going to put my value to 1. Let me change my value 1 to 1. Oops, it's doing it to my value 2. I want it to be my value 1. Okay, so if it's 1, that part will be true, but this says not. So if this is a 1 and it's saying, yeah, that's true, this says, no, it's false. So if I click this, it's going to say the condition is false because my value, so this is basically a not equal. If my value is not equal to 1, then that's when you'll do the true one. So it is 1. So if I were to change this to something other than 1, and it keeps changing the variable I want to change, let me put it here. So if I change the my value 1 to 0, that means that my value is not equal to 1. So it should do the true path. So I'm going to leave this. I'm going to actually make this project public for you. I'm going to share it out so that you can play around with this and get a really good feel for what they do, because you can actually get even more complex than this. And this is what Scratchy 2 is going to help us look at. Looking at our Scratchy 2, I've made this slightly more complex, the condition on these ifs. I'm using ands and I'm using ors, and those are over here. And so what they do is they allow you to test more than one condition at a time. Now be careful between the and the or. So these are logical ands and logical ors. So a logical and, in order for the entire condition to be true, all those small conditions around the ands, and you can have more than one and, must all be true, all of them. If you're using an or, then only one of them must be true. More than one of them could be true, but at least one of them has to be true. So if I'm looking at my values here, I'm going to set them both to 1. So my value 1 and my value 2 are both 1. So what the first one says is if my value 1 is 1 and also at the same time my value 2 is 1, then you can consider this condition true. It should go down the true path. And if I click on here, it does it. Now let's go down to the or. The or says one or the other. So if my value 1 is 1 or my value 2 is 1, either one of them, now in this case both of them are true, but either one of them I'm going to go down to the true path. And it does, the or condition is true. Now what happens if one of them isn't a 1? So I'm going to change the value of my value 2. So I've got my value 1 is 1, my value 2 is 2. So the first one says my value 1 has to be 1, and at the same time my value 2 also has to be 1. Well, that's not the case. My value 2 is 0. So this will not be true. I run through it, it's going down the false path. If you look at the second one with an or, it says my value 1 has to be 1, or could be, maybe it's the my value 2 that's 1, but only one of them must be 1. And that's what we've got here. Only one of them is 1. So this should return true using the or case. So it's a very subtle difference. Be super careful and or. And kind of related to that is what Scratchy 3 is here for. So Scratchy 3 is to help us with less than equal or greater than equal, because if you look in here, we only have less than, we only have greater than as supplied built-in conditions. Well, what if you want a less than equal or greater than equal? Should you use or should you use and? So let's think about this. So right here it says, I want to see if my value 1 is less than or equal to 0. Now the wording should help you here, because we don't say less than and equal to. We say less than or equal to. So that seems like the right one. So if my value 1 is less than 1 or my value 1 equals 1, be true. Otherwise, that's not the case. So let's think of values that would fit, that would make this true. So if you have an x less than or equal to 1, if x is 1, well, that's true. Because x is equal than 1, x less than equal to 1 should be true. So let's set my value 1 here, whoops, my value 1 to a value of 1. That's the equal case, right? It's set to 1. So I click this, and it says, yep, you're right, it is less than or equal to 1. Now what if you use an and by mistake here? Think about it. If my value 1 is less than 1, and at the same time it has to be equal than 1, well, what number is going to be less than 1 and equal to it at the same time? So if the value is 1, the less than 1 part will be false, but the my value part equal 1 will be true. But it's an and. Both have to be true at the same time. So if I were to click here, it's going to go down the false path. It isn't, but it is. So that doesn't work. Now let's try another case that would work when it's my value 1 equal to 0, say, or anything that is smaller than 1. So I'm just putting in a 0. So in the or case, is my value 1 less than 1? Well, my value 1 is 0. So yeah, 0 is less than 1. That's true. Now, it's not equal to 1 because its value is 0. This one's false. But in the OR case, a true or a false, well, that's true because at least one of them is true. But if you go to the AND case, the less than 1, well, that part's true, but the equal to 1 is not true. So this works, right? The OR. But the AND, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. Now, if you pick one that is bad, say you set my value 1 to a value that isn't less than or equal to 1, I just made it 2. They both should fail that because is it less than 1? No, it's 2. Is it equal to 1? No, it's 2. Both of these are false. That's the only way with an OR you're going to go down the false path. Now, with the AND case, that is also going to work because is it less than 1? No. And is it equal to 1? No, it's 2. So you're going to go down the false case. So you can be fooled by the AND if you test on the wrong things. So all I can say is be very, very careful if you're doing a less than equal or greater than equal. With the greater than equal will look just like this, except with the greater sign instead of the less than. You want it to be an OR. And just remember, think about how you say it. You say less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. You don't say and equal to. So just wanted you to be careful there. And anyway, that's our deeper dive into if then else. So I will make this project public. I will share it, and that way you can refer to it if you're having a little trouble with your conditional statements. Thanks for watching.